former New Zealand Prime Minister Jenny Shipley sat down for an exclusive interview with Leaders Talk. Over the past 30 years, she has visited China more than 100 times, witnessing the nation's reform and opening up.
China's rising is one of the most remarkable stories of the centuries that we've just most recently lived through.
In the face of international distractions, she believes that it's a moment for countries to be calm.
Also in these moments of uncertainty, how China moves forward and the President Xi's speeches are clear. He wants peaceful development, he wants growth to be shared, and he wants prosperity.
She expresses admiration for President Xi's strategic foresight.
Has prompted us to think about not just insular and our own interest, but trying to see whether we can do well and lift others.
Exclusive interview with former New Zealand Prime Minister Jenny Shipley. Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome to Leaders Talk, where we meet leaders, thinkers, and trailblazers. I'm Guan in Beijing. My guest today is Dame Jenny Shipley, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. Over the past 3 decades, she's visited China more than 100 times. This March, she returned once again for the Boao Forum for Asia. Having witnessed China's development and transformation up close, what does she make of the Chinese-style modernization? As the first developed country to support China's entry into the WTO, how does she view China's continued opening up and what it means for the world? And as someone who values Confucian thinking, what lessons does she draw from the ancient wisdom in today's uncertain world? Let's listen in. Prime Minister Shipley, welcome back to Beijing. You have been a long-standing member of the Boao Advisory Board. The theme, of course, this year is charting Asia's future in a changing world. How relevant do you think this theme is, and where do you see the future role of Asia in this increasingly fragmented and uncertain world?
The topic was perfect for the time. It allowed everybody who was present to really focus on the current circumstances. And look, a resilient Asia is what we need. It's not a moment for us to lose our confidence, to be overly distracted. We need to remember that Asia has been the engine room for the global economy for at least the last decade. And even in the forward projections, Asia is going to be where most of the activity is. And yes, of course, there are some very significant international distractions, but I think it's a moment to be calm. The Boao Forum really looked at how collaboration can make the difference and how to use RCEP, for example, how to revitalize APEC, how to think about bringing China into the CPTPP, other opportunities that really still continue to grow trade and prosperity for our region. That was very constructive.
Just this afternoon, many global CEOs and corporate leaders attended a session with President Xi at the Great Hall of the People, and a few CEOs, corporate leaders said this to the Chinese leader. They believe that China has become an oasis of certainty and a thriving hub for business and investment. Do you share their assessment about where China is?
Look, I do. I mean, you know, China's rising is one of the most remarkable stories of the centuries that we've just most recently lived through. And President Xi's comments have done nothing but continue to make it clear that China is opening up. That was a very important message in this moment, that China's not going to go backward or be intimidated, that they want to do business with the world, and it will attract direct foreign investment. It will allow CEOs to be confident, not only in China, but in many of your neighbours, and also the Belt and Road network that China has been so instrumental in supporting its development. These are also economies that are projected to grow. The innovation being led out of China, I think, is also continuing to illustrate that China's here to stay, that you are repeatedly demonstrating that you're at the front edge of new innovation, your cars, AI, DeepSeek. I mean, these are very important moments.
Have you tried DeepSeek yourself, Mr. PM?
I have. I'm not very expert at it, but it's completely equal if not better. The major options do slightly different things, but yes, I have tried DeepSeek.
Liked its algorithm capabilities, so
Well,
on and so
look,
forth?
it would be early days for me to pass judgment on it, but I value the fact that we have a choice, that there are many different AI options, and it's very important at this moment that China can demonstrate that they're not reliant on other people's technology. They're continuing to demonstrate innovation, and that's not just DeepSeek. I mean, this has been going on, and it gave the world a boost. It didn't make them distressed. It thought, this is a very positive mood.
Jenny Shipley served as Prime Minister of New Zealand from 1997 to 1999, becoming the first woman in the country's history to hold the position. During her time in office, she actively promoted the development of China-New Zealand relations and supported China's entry into the World Trade Organization. In 1999, the two countries agreed to launch early assessments and studies for a bilateral free trade agreement, marking the starting point of China's first FTA negotiations with a developed country. Even after leaving office, Shipley has remained active on the global stage. She is a strong advocate for globalization and multilateralism, and a witness to China's remarkable development story.
Madam, you have been in China, according to yourself, for over 100 times in the past 3 decades? Is that true?
Yeah, certainly it is. More than 100 times. I've lost count.
And the first time would be the 1995. How would you compare what you remember from China back then versus what it is now over the span of 30 years?
The China I saw in 1995 is unrecognizable now in some respects. But the development of China, speaks for itself. My children, my grandchildren have been here. One of my grandchildren, a now 12-year-old, said to his mother, "Why did you ever leave?" And that's a very interesting lens from a Western boy who, while he was born in Beijing, he didn't grow up very much here, but through his eyes, he saw China as highly progressive. And I think it was a surprise to him, although he had nothing to compare it against.
So this is a generational thing now, the China connection, the China bonding. From you to your children and now grandchildren.
I want my grandchildren to be part of the future. China is part of the future. It's not only population-wise, economically, it's also regionally, but there's more to it than this. China's an old society, and I think any civilization that's had so much experience has a lot of wisdom, but also in these moments of uncertainty, how China moves forward, and the President Xi's speeches are clear. He wants peaceful development, he wants growth to be shared, and he wants prosperity. And in my experience, that's what all citizens want. So China is going to continue to have a very big influence.
You talk about civilization. On multiple occasions, you quoted Confucius and his golden mean. And of course, from Mencius, another great scholar of China, forging and creating this community, a collective. And you thought that those were very globally relevant given the age that we live in right now.
Well, it is. And China has succeeded in getting the UN to have a day of civilizations. And I think Mencius and Confucianism, but Mencius is one that has always interested me, because not only does he say,
How so?
Well, think about your own development. Make sure you are right first, and then look after your family. But he was also a global thinker. He said, take your messages into other countries. And I think in these moments, sharing civilization experiences, in my own country, we have our Maori people. And they have long-standing, we call them whakatoki, very profound, thoughtful sayings that can help us reflect carefully, develop our benevolent and progressive nature, and then apply it to our current circumstances.
And you drew parallel previously also about the similarities between the Maori culture,
yes.
Valuing self-determination, self-reliance, and seeking harmonious coexistence, and that of the Chinese culture, where harmonious coexistence and self-reliance is also key.
There are very interesting similarities, and as I said, I think that at a time where people are anxious and uncertain, looking to our strengths, and many of those old scholars and philosophers that live at the heart of our respective countries, we can do very well by thinking about what they said, and then even thinking about if they were confronted with AI, global dynamic relationships that seem stressed, what would they say?
President Xi proposed the global initiatives of China, namely Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, and Global Civilizations Initiative. What do you think are the practical significance and relevance of these initiatives proposed by President Xi to the world today?
Well, there are a number of development initiatives, and China's got a good story to tell. I mean, the development initiative is sharing China's experience and knowledge. And look, there are no countries that can match China's performance within the social development goals or the sustainable development goals. And China's insight and suggestions have to be taken seriously, because they have also been able to demonstrate that if you apply these ideas, you can lift people out of poverty by offering them education, finding work for them, ensuring that their housing and social circumstances are improving. And those strategies for development, sharing our knowledge across borders and sharing experiences and allowing foreign investment and foreign talent to be shared at certain moments, to share our education platforms where young people can go and study or come here and study. These are very sound ideas that will help shape the future properly.
What kind of a leader do you think President Xi is? And what do you think of his leadership, his governance, and where do you think he's taking China?
President Xi's vision of not only what's been good for China, but also connecting people to markets and markets to people. I was present in Boao when President Xi came many years ago and talked about the Belt and Road. And I was very curious and thought, this is interesting. I went home and talked to several of my political colleagues who were then in government and said, we need to follow this. I mean, it's been a very visionary. If people are connected to markets and markets to people, they have the opportunity to prosper. And I think that vision of connecting continents together has been one of the great gifts that the President has prompted us to think about, not just insular and our own interest, but trying to see whether we can do well and lift others. The other thing that I've got great admiration for is, he's very strategic. I watch the rolling out of infrastructure in a way that's anticipating the future. Very few nations have either the capacity, the financial and engineering capacity, let alone the leadership to have such a degree of focus that in order to be enabled as a nation, we need these layers of capability, and your G5 and soon G6 networks and your transport infrastructure. I mean, I couldn't have imagined in 1995, when I came here, that I can now get on a train from Beijing to Nanjing, which I did recently, and the best experiences in the world. And I think the President's been very visionary and guiding the provinces, but also seeing that China is connected. This not letting people be left behind has been an important vision, so that the less prosperous provinces have also been connected to these networks. And I think over time that's going to disperse more evenly the growth experience in China, which I know has been one of his objectives. So I have a lot of admiration. You will be leading the world, not following the world, because of some of the inspirational suggestions that he has been able to make.
And do you think ecological civilization, which is very much emphasized in China's current campaign when it comes to modernization and social and economic governance, can also serve as a useful reference for other developing countries who's modernizing itself while heeding the cause for protecting the earth?
Again, I've done some work here in China on how China is using the financial system, for example, to very clearly send messages around green finance. And there's some significant innovation in the banking sector, in some of the advisory sectors where, even the international firms now know that China's serious, and they are designing evaluation systems, monitoring systems with these big industries, so that there's absolutely meaningful change.
I want to shift gears and talk about China-New Zealand relations, which has been remarkable and kept seeing diplomatic milestones and firsts. For example, New Zealand was the first developed country to complete negotiations with China over its entry into the WTO, of which you are a part of in the early days. And also, New Zealand was the first country to recognize China's full market economy status, the first developed country to negotiate a bilateral FTA, and of course, to complete one with China. What do you think these firsts say about New Zealand's independent foreign policy vis-a-vis China?
We believe in free trade. Some of my leaders before me and myself and others genuinely felt that it was not only good for New Zealand, but it was good for the world. And when China was moving toward wanting to apply to become part of the WTO, New Zealand felt that a huge, emerging, important economy, even though at that moment there were still many challenges that China was dealing with, that it was much better to be in the rules-based system than outside it. And so we took the decision that it was completely sensible to share our experience. When I chaired APEC in 1999, many of my visits prior to APEC included New Zealand's open commitment to supporting China's accession to the WTO. New Zealand said, look, we are complementary as economies. We produce massive amounts of food. We need your imports. Could we see if we could work out an agreement that was mutually beneficial and also set a precedent where we both can learn? And I'm very proud to say that in retrospect, that's exactly what happened. We worked together systematically. Every now and again we hit problems. We sat down and worked them through. And China needed some time to remove all of the tariffs, but over time that's happened. And it's a very comprehensive FTA and well worth looking at for other countries if they're looking to do it.
Talking about the deliveries of FTA, if you look back in the day, of course, it has leaped forward to what it is today, an all-encompassing FTA, which was upgraded again between China and New Zealand in recent years. What do you think are the pioneering impact of the China-New Zealand FTA now that you look back at it?
It's completely and utterly invaluable. Obviously, economically, it's highly valuable. But today, we're starting to buy cars from China. It's not just tourism and education. They were early gains. And New Zealand's food, obviously, we value the China market very much. And we welcome the fact that many Chinese consumers love the products that we can bring here. The China of 30 years ago was just beginning in areas of sophisticated manufacturing. I visited one of your car companies late last year, and really and truly, the designs of these Chinese vehicles now and the quality of the automobiles that are coming out of them and the innovation are extremely exciting and extremely competitive. New Zealanders are buying many Chinese cars now, and I understand there are new brands that will come into New Zealand again this year. Every household has very many things that come from your nation, and they are as normal as our milk powder is in your homes in China.
Only when I went to New Zealand for the first time did I learn that, that was over 15 years ago, did I learn that the equivalent, another way of saying New Zealander is kiwi.
Sure.
Which is one of the most loved fruits from your country.
Well, it's a fruit, but we also have a little bird called a kiwi. It's our national bird, and which is why I think kiwifruit was named after our national bird. The kiwifruit is an outstanding fruit product, and I see it everywhere in China.
Kiwifruit originally comes from China, as far back as the Tang Dynasty. The poet Sun Shun wrote, "By the well rail in the courtyard, a trellis of kiwifruit grows." In the early 20th century, kiwifruit were brought to New Zealand, where its natural environment provided ideal conditions for the fruit to thrive. Because its fuzzy brown appearance resembled New Zealand's national bird, the kiwi, locals began calling it kiwifruit, a name that also sounds similar to the Chinese word 介异果, meaning exotic fruit. Every spring, ships carrying thousands of tons of fresh kiwi fruit set sail from New Zealand to China. After a journey of more than 10 days, they arrive, still fresh, thanks to full cold chain logistics and the streamlined customs processes made possible by the China-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement. Today, China has been New Zealand's largest trading partner, top export destination, and biggest source of imports for several consecutive years. Economic and trade cooperation has become both the anchor and engine of the two countries' growing relationship.
You used many words to describe China-New Zealand relations, and among them, two words really stick out to me. One is tactful engagement, and the other is progressive attitudes. Can you explain why you love those two words?
I think tactful engagement means that it's better to be in the room, speaking directly to each other, and where you can say safely if you don't agree, but you don't offend people. I think if you stand outside the room and use megaphone diplomacy, you get nowhere. It doesn't take you forward. So New Zealand, because we're small and we do have an independent foreign policy and a very global trade policy, to be progressive is to be open. It doesn't mean, again, that you have to agree on political philosophies. New Zealand's political philosophy and China's political philosophy is very different. But we respect that difference, and it doesn't prevent us from moving ahead together. If we have things we need to say to each other, we do so respectfully. But progression means you don't get caught in behaviours that lead to unintended consequences. Every now and again, things are delicate. But overall, New Zealand prime ministers and foreign ministers and trade ministers, whether it's with China or anyone else, we continue to try and say, people want prosperity and they want peace and security. Let's try and progress those issues and be progressive in our attitude, dealing with the things that worry us, but not letting them be a barrier for why we shouldn't move forward.
There are other goodwill ambassadors between our two countries and our two peoples. Among them, Riwi Ali is one of them. You visited his former residence, I believe, back in the day. And really, he was an educator coming to China in the early 20s and of the last century, of course, and stayed for 60 years. He helped the Chinese with our liberation causes, helping the poor and underprivileged getting education and helping our two peoples understand each other more. And in 2019, President Xi Jinping even visited his former residence during a tour in Gansu province. And on later occasions, President Xi said the Chinese and New Zealanders should inherit and pass on this Riwi Ali spirit to the next generations to come.
Yes.
How do you feel about all this? What do you think that the Riwi Ali spirit embodies?
Well, he was an interesting person and he was very progressive. It was not fashionable or common for people like Riwi to come from New Zealand to China at that time. But he was comfortable doing it. He had his own beliefs, but he did a great deal of work. And I see people from China coming to his hometown where he was born in New Zealand. And I've had the privilege of going to his hometown. I like to think that every generation brings its own pioneers. They don't need to necessarily be like Riwi, but they can be progressive in their own way. And
you also said that tourism, you believe, is the best foreign policy a
Absolutely.
country can have. Look where we are right now, visa-free for New Zealand citizens. Chinese are going to New Zealand, with a surge of Chinese tourists coming to your country. How do you like the visa-free policy?
Well, I love Chinese visitors coming to New Zealand. I think they feel at home, but they also can see our spectacular country, which is really as diverse as China, but condensed to into a very small space. I'm thrilled that China has opened up the visa-free tourism. I mean, many people will enjoy it. There is another point though. When people to people get a chance to understand and know each other better through just shared experiences, it genuinely is the best sort of foreign policy we can get.
You made no secret about your love for Chinese food, Chinese cuisine. You said that it is a story in itself and adventure. Tell us more about it.
Well, I've been very lucky to travel widely in China, and it is genuinely an adventure. You know, the different cuisines of different areas, so many chilies that I can hardly breathe, and so much corn in the north that I enjoy that type of cuisine. The Chinese are very capable at using almost anything that's there. And I often say to people, don't lose the old Chinese cuisines.
Do you have a favorite?
Oh, how could you choose? I love the dumplings. I like, you know, food in context. I've had many beautiful meals in China with wonderful people, but I've also understood more about where they are and what their experience has been. So it's not only the food, it's the food in the context in which we've been able to share each other's company.
Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
In our conversation, Prime Minister Dame Shipley called China's rise one of the most extraordinary stories in modern history. She believes that China has much to share, from experience to ideas, and that in uncertain times, it is all the more important for countries to stay confident and clear-headed. Reflecting on President Xi Jinping's recent meeting with global business leaders, she pointed to one clear takeaway. That is, China isn't turning back, it is not backing down, it is moving forward and ready to engage with the world. Thank you for watching this episode of Leaders Talk. I'm Wang in Beijing. I'll see you again next time.